Hey, well, what is up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Faith and Pop Culture Podcast. It is me, your host, Daniel, and I am joined once again, as I always am, by the one, the only Nyah Carlson. How are you doing today on this nice festive December morning?
Yeah, I'm doing decent. That's my choice word today is decent. How are you?
Yeah, well, hey, it could be worse.
It could be.
Yeah, well, there's a long-running joke I have with my wife because right after we started dating, she posted on her Facebook that Sarah is content, and I mean, like, there's nothing wrong with being. I'm glad she was content. I don't know. I was hoping for something
Excited.
a little more passionate and excited, but you know what? Sometimes
She's
content.
like, she's settled.
Yeah, I'm fine. It could be worse, I guess, but I'm hey, fair enough for her. Before we get in, there's some interesting stuff for us to get into this week. But before we do, I do feel like we need to address last week because upon further review, I realized that both of us, in fact, dropped the ball last week. Because answer me this now: what episode are we on right now?
68.
Yes. Which, if you can do the math and subtract 1, which episode were we on last week?
67.
Yeah.
Did we say the wrong one?
No, we did not say the one. See, you're so blissfully unplugged, I think. We went through a whole episode number 67 without obnoxiously giving in to the 6-7 meme.
I'm glad that we did. Why would we give in? We have to stand strong, Daniel.
I know. I feel like we missed an opportunity, and now I guess maybe 167. Well, if that is still a thing, then we'll have to address it then.
Well, this past weekend apparently was 6-7 weekend, so I was hearing that a lot. On Sunday, I was like, I'm so glad that I'm not in high school or middle school anymore.
I know. As a guy that has 2 very young middle school kids, I my cup is filled with 6-7. So maybe it's better that
time to overflow.
But speaking of things that are concerning and obnoxious and give anxiety to people, there's a couple. The main thing we wanted to get into this week is the new Knives Out movie, which comes out this weekend. A lot of interesting stuff going on with that movie. We've both seen it, so we're going to dive into that. But before we do, I did thought we think we should just touch on kind of a cultural thing. In some ways, it's a bit more like, inside baseball of like the industry, and I don't know, maybe not like initially at least seem as like widely, of interest of why do Christians care about stuff like this. But I think it does, there is a trickle down effect that will affect Christians and the way we engage with entertainment. And that is that Netflix continues to take over the world. Streaming continues like a plague to spread through and kind of suck up all the traditional theatrical business model. So kind of the big story going on right now is that Netflix is in the process of sort of buying out, merging with Warner Brothers, which is one of like the legacy, the OG Hollywood studios, been around forever. Netflix kind of, I know they've been around for a while, but they're still sort of the new kid in the industry that's kind of bullying their way in and streaming, changing things up. So they are in the process of a $72 billion deal. I
can't even picture how much money that is.
I know we wanted to make an offer too for the Collision to buy it, but unfortunately we fell about $72 billion short for that. And I will say it's not finalized yet. Like there is it's all complicated business stuff that goes way over my head. I know like Paramount just like maybe today or yesterday is trying to offer, step in there and save the industry and all that kind of stuff. So all the stuff, the details will change, but I think as of now, Warner Brothers is going to be kind of swallowed up by Netflix. And like Warner Brothers is a big, besides just being like a legacy studio, like they got big properties. Like Harry Potter is Warner Brothers, Lord of the Rings, obviously hits close to home for me, is like a Warner Brothers property. Like HBO, that is connected to Warner Brothers. So like, essentially one of their bigger like streaming rivals they now own. So I don't know what that means for HBO. And there's a couple things with this, because again, this, I think in one sense, who knows what's going to happen with this until it happens. In another sense, you can kind of, you have a pretty good idea based on prior track record. Because Netflix CEO Ted Sarandos has not been necessarily a champion of. He's like the antithesis of like a Christopher Nolan, like like not necessarily a big movie theater kind of guy, and he kind of went viral back a couple of years ago. I think it was like in New York Times article interview where he was talking about Barbenheimer, like Barbie and Oppenheimer, when those were, everyone went back to theaters and it was a big thing. And he kind of went viral for saying that, like, those movies would have enjoyed just as big of an audience had they been on a streamer as opposed to theaters, kind of downplaying the whole significance of that. And kind of the other another quote that he's talked about as far as just sort of his role and like how he's changing up Hollywood in his eyes for the better, where he is sort of asked like, "Hey, are you like destroying Hollywood?" And he said, "No, we are saving Hollywood." And then he pointed to like the struggling box office, that people seem like they're maybe not going to theaters as much, and added, "What does that say? What is the consumer trying to tell us? That they'd like to watch movies at home, thank you. The studios and the theaters are duking it out over trying to preserve a 45-day window that is completely out of step with the consumer experience of just loving a movie." And he's been kind of clear throughout the years of just, in his mind, like movie theaters are like an outdated business and the future utopia of entertainment is obviously on streaming. So what are some of your, because there's, like I said, there are some things with this that I think is relevant for, I mean, anyone that's like plugged into culture and likes movies and wants good movies. I think also just for Christians, there's some stuff, but what is some of your, especially as a filmmaker yourself, what are some of your kind of initial thoughts to this Netflix takeover?
Well, my very first, I had never heard these quotes. I heard about, this merger and everything, and I already have some thoughts about this. But after you saying that quote, I'm like, well, obviously, he doesn't listen to the Pope, first of all. And second of all, obviously, he's not an artist because, that's not the point of Hollywood. That's not the point of movies. It's a collective social cultural experience. And if you're just watching it at home, there's something special and unique about the cinema, about going to the theater, and he just obviously doesn't understand that. And as a filmmaker, I don't want my stuff to go straight to streaming. If I ever, God willing, make it to when that's an opportunity, I want to have a theater run. I think that is one of the key reasons that film is so powerful is it's the collective experience. But I mean, also, I think it's just scary because they're obviously trying, like you said, take over the world. Literally, they're trying to have a monopoly. They don't need more money, okay? They don't need that.
Yeah, and I think it's because there's sort of been this debate of hey, are they just leaving money on the table? They could release, and they have done it now and then. We'll get into Knives Out is a Netflix movie, and yet they gave it, you went and saw it in the 1 week theatrical release, and there sort of is that what if they just did it more? Isn't that free money? And the reality is they have a very vested interest in people not if you're at the movie theater, then you're not at home watching Netflix. They, for them, that's more valuable than they don't want the movie theaters to thrive because people at movie theaters aren't streaming shows at the same time. So
it's all about numbers.
Yeah, so some of this some of the talk about, he sort of talked about, hey, we're not necessarily going to be pulling things. Well, there'll still be theatrical releases, but if you read between the lines a bit with some of his language, it is very kind of mushy. Well, kind of for now, as trends change, and as we try to see what the consumer habits are, it's you're trying to destroy movie theaters is what you're trying to do.
Well, one of the most inspiring things for me as a creative, whenever not even if I'm currently working on a project, but one of the most inspiring, creatively fulfilling things for me is to watch a movie in the theater. It's so drastically different from watching it at home. Even if you're with your friends watching something, the movie theater is there's no other place really like it, Yeah,
and I think that is sort of where the and I will admit, I am part of the problem. And I'm okay, and some of that is just that you are young. I am not as young as you, and I have kids, and I do go see a lot of movies in theaters just because I'm reviewing them for the Collision, so I probably see more movies in theaters than a lot of people do. So I'm also part of the solution, I think. But for me, there is a sense of you know what, especially when you have like kids and you put them to bed, and it's, hey, if I'm gonna go watch this with my wife, we got to get a babysitter, or or I'm gonna go by myself and I got to go
Mhm.
late, and it's, oh, I guess I can just watch it on streaming and it will be out, you know, soon. Like, I
Yeah.
know back in the day, it used to be like a year after the movie, you'd finally
It's a
get it on.
while.
Now it's like 45 days or so is like standard. And like, according to him, like even that, like what it seems like is you're going to get movies for a week in theaters, and like the next week or so, it's going to be on Netflix, at least
Yeah.
for like Netflix, Warner Brothers. Like, obviously that
Mhm.
doesn't apply to Disney and other places, but like, it seems like that window is going to shrink. And like, in some sense, like, yeah, like, that is actually kind of nice to, hey, I couldn't go see that movie right now. I guess I'll just see it next week and like still be part of the conversation. The other part is just that I think a lot of people are going to be, hey, I already pay for Netflix. I can see it for free next week. I
Yeah.
don't need to go see Avatar in the theater, I guess. Like, I'll just see it. And, and then movies make less money, and it does change things.
You have, but like there's certain movies too, especially like Avatar, that you have to see in theaters. It's a theater movie. Like that's what they were created for. And so it kind of like undermines the artist's work when you watch it at home for something like Avatar or Oppenheimer or something like that. Um yeah.
Yeah, like it is such a good, and like, yeah, Avatar is the perfect example for that. And, the new one comes out, what, next week?
Mhm.
And like, because like I've seen those movies in theaters, also watched them on like Disney with my kids not that long ago, and like they're still good. Like, I think movies will hold up, and you don't
Mhm.
just need that. But there is something about like the theater, and I do feel like, as I don't know, like as Christians, like we should have a vested interest in like shared cultural communal
Mhm.
spaces, because like those things are going away. And like, there's been a lot of studies and things about that, as far as like bowling alleys and like the mall and like all these places that even like 20 years ago, 15 years ago, were like more populated,
Mhm.
and like now we're, not that we're not interacting with people still, but a lot of that's moved and like online, and now we're just maybe playing a video game, we're talking, we're still
Mhm.
interacting with people, but but it's, we're not, we sort of miss some of that physical in person. And I mean, you saw that after the pandemic, even with church, and like even church is sort of moving more online, or like you can come, but you can also, if it's more convenient for
Mhm.
you, you can just, queue up YouTube and, make pancakes. And like, there sort of is sort of that movement of it. And I don't know, like, I think, the Christians necessarily, is like a primary issue of whether movies are released on Netflix or in the theater for 45 days. Like,
Maybe for
n-
me. I don't know about for most people.
but like, I do think it is a primary thing, as far as like, are we actually around other people?
Mhm.
And like, I say that as like an introvert that, you know, is happy to often not be around people. Like, there is sort of that sense of like, even, and the experience is different too. Like, even, like seeing a movie, even like the audience you see it with, like I find that with like doing my reviews, like I love when I can get like an advanced digital screener and like watch it on my own, and I can think
Mhm.
through it more carefully and pause it if I need to. And but like, especially something like a comedy, or like, you sort of see how people react to things, and they're all laughing, and it just sort of changes that experience a bit.
Mhm.
Or, and I think the other way too, if like no one's laughing, like it's clearly not resonating, like you just, I don't know, there is, even if you're not necessarily, hopefully, like elbowing your neighbor and like talking to them, like there is sort of that sense that you're like sharing this experience together. And
Yeah, that's a good point, talking about like not knowing really if it's resonating with someone. Like maybe it just resonates with like five critics who have really big voices, but it really doesn't matter to the majority of the population, you know? That's such a good way to gauge it. And that's, I mean, that's something that filmmakers do, is they have their screening and then they have people give notes and see like what they can do better before releasing it to a wider audience. Like that's super valuable in just the creative process, and that's something that we're also gonna, I mean, we might lose because of this deal, or just because of like people like good old Ted's like mindset when it comes to stuff like this.
yeah, and I think even just like, I think, and when Sam was on the podcast too, we talked about this a lot, like just the mindset of like, once we started talking about movies and stuff as like content, like how much content we
Yeah.
got more content. Like, a lot of that came from streaming, where things, not that. And the crazy thing is, like, people act like Netflix is just some hack sort of studio. Like, like Stranger Things is crushing it. Like, they've done. I mean, Knives Out is a great movie. Like, it's not like Netflix doesn't know how to make good
Mm-mm.
stuff. They also surround that good stuff with a lot of slop just to fill their algorithms and stuff. Like, but like, it's not like they're just, like, they can make. I don't think movie quality necessarily is going to instantly. Like, I think Warner Brothers makes a lot of bad movies too. Like, who knows for how some of that will kind of
Yeah. Well, that's
play up.
yeah, that's sorry to interrupt, but that's another thing that I was worried about is like if Netflix has everything, then like the executives, the I don't know if this is true. This is what I'm expecting, but like the executives that are above everything is automatically gonna shrink from having both Netflix executives and Warner Brothers executives figuring out what kind of stuff to make, which I think might stifle the types of movies that are being produced too. So it's going to be more of a Netflix feel for more movies, which isn't really a good thing. So it kind of also feels like there's just going to be the battle between big studio heads and then independent filmmakers is just going to become even more pronounced.
Yeah, and
Which
the crazy thing too, and then we can maybe move on, is like,
yeah.
in some ways, like, Warner Brothers was the studio that was like kind of the most vocal and like overt about sort of fighting back against some of the
Mm,
movies they'd made. They like, and their CEO and stuff, talking about sort of the approach to their types of movies and original content and stuff. And it was sort of like they were the studio that was like kind of the anti Netflixy,
yeah.
that type of streaming. And then
But they got $72 billion.
and then it's like,
That's their
oh, I know
number.
now. Yeah, and then apparently anyone can be bought for
Hmm.
$72 billion. So it is unfortunate. I think, like you said, like, to lose some of that. To not that Netflix can't make a good movie, but I just don't want every movie to be like Netflix. Like, I think it's good to have lots of people making different types of movies. So I don't know. We'll see sort of how that falls out. But I do think Christians shouldn't be too quick to sort of dismiss when, like, the culture's changing to drive people more in their homes
Yeah.
alone, as opposed to actually like having to leave the house and
Yeah.
heaven forbid you come across a human being. Like, I think there is a vested interest in that. But speaking of Netflix
Definitely.
and good movies that Netflix is releasing in theaters, but also with very short theatrical releases,
Hmm.
kind of one of the big movie coming out this week is the third Knives Out movie, Wake Up Dead Man: A Knives Out Mystery. And I will say, like, I'm not a fan of like, I call this Knives Out: Wake Up. Like, put the franchise first. It's sort of like,
I
I know
like,
you're.
yeah.
Are you gonna challenge me on that? Because it's like the Star Wars when they would do, like, like whatever, a Star Wars story, or I don't know.
Oh,
I never like when it's like
well,
a Knives Out mystery. Like, just call it Knives Out.
I think it maybe it I'm kind of torn because I think it makes more sense for when it says a Star Wars story because you have your main like trilogies, even though it's like the first three and then the prequels and then the new ones, and then you have your offshoots, and so I like when the offshoots say a Star Wars story. Honestly, I think they could say nothing at all because it's Star Wars, so it's
Yeah.
super popular. But when it comes to Knives Out, I mean, everyone knows that it's a Knives Out movie too, so I don't even think that you need that in it. Like, just call it Wake Up Dead Man. I think it's cool. Did you know what that's from? How he came up with the title?
No, I don't.
I heard in some interview he said it's from a U2 song about losing your faith. I was like,
Oh.
I
I
haven't
mean,
heard the song, so
he
we'll
is of
find
the
it.
he is of the right age
Yeah.
to be pulling from a YouTube, and of the right kind of background, as we will
Uh-huh.
get into in just a second. Because to foreshadow, I actually had the opportunity to chat with Ryan Johnson, which was pretty cool to
Mhm.
chat with him. He's a cool guy. We'll get into sort of that interview and share some of his clips. But this movie, these franchise, like the Wake Up movies, or Wake Up. See, now I'm confused. If they put Knives Out, I would have got it right, and now I'm gonna call it,
Woo!
Knives or Wake Up or whatever.
A Wake
Uh,
Up Mystery.
but these movies have been wildly popular. There's just really, I know there is some, like there's the Agatha Christie, like the Kenneth Branagh movies, like there are like mystery movies being made, but like not a ton. Like it's not like
Mm-mm.
there's like a huge,
Not anymore, at least.
yeah, I guess some of that has sort of gone away. And it seems like Johnson is very much trying to like revive the that sort of genre and that sort of
Mm-hmm.
his thing. And this is an interesting movie. So we both saw this movie. You saw it in
Yes.
theaters. I saw it on they sent a digital version for me to screen. So we experienced it different. But I think we both had similar takeaways. So
Mm-hmm.
maybe real quick, let's sort of hear some of your thoughts on the movie. I know we've talked about this a little bit,
Yeah.
and then we can get into, because there is a, the reason we're talking about this movie on the podcast is there is a lot of really fascinating stuff related to faith in this movie. So
Yeah.
religious, centered on like a religious murder, and uh, just a lot of interesting things going on. But initial impressions of
Mm-hmm.
Knives Out 3, Wake Up Dead Man, Knives Out Mystery, or whatever this thing is.
Well, first, I want to hear, you have a vendetta against the director, don't you? Even though
See,
you
yeah,
guys are friends now,
now
but
that now we're friends. Well, here's the thing, and I think I don't know what we haven't done this long enough together for me to know where you, like how
where I stand.
hardcore Star Wars you are. Like Star Wars for me were the first live action non-cartoon movies I ever saw. Like,
Oh, that's big.
like my dad, it was like a moment. Like it was like boys become men, and we sit
Yeah.
down and we watch the movies, and like like I was I could clean up at some Star Wars Trivial Pursuit back in the day. I could, they were very important to me. So I was very plugged into the whole discourse of Star Wars, and like his movie Star Wars: The Last Jedi, Episode 8, kind of like the middle of the sequel trilogy. If for those that aren't as nerdy as maybe I am or plugged in, like that was sort of the fairly or not, like where things sort of changed as far as the fandom, and like it was a very divisive movie. It did some stuff with the characters and the approach to the story that really sort of, everyone was kind of on board with when Star Wars came back. Force Awakens, it's nostalgia, we're back, and his movie was very much like, oh, like a lot of people really don't like it, a lot of people do, and like it became super toxic, and it's really hasn't changed. Like the Star Wars fandom and the movies haven't done well anymore, and like it's a lot of that can be traced back to just him shaking the boat. And like I am one of those that I, I don't think I necessarily didn't like it for the same toxic reasons that some other people did. Like I just wasn't crazy. Like I'm still not. Like when I have watched it back, not that long ago, my kids were watching it. I watched some of it with them. Like
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I don't like his take on Star Wars. Like
Yeah.
I think he sort of he sort of deconstructs the things that I like about Star Wars.
His was the second in the new series.
Yeah, so he's the one that
Okay.
invented porgs. So those little cute bird alien things.
Oh, they're so cute. Yeah.
We can thank Ryan Johnson for that. And I will say, especially after having talked to him, I mean, I've always thought, even though I didn't like his movie, I always thought he was really good with interviews, and seemed like a really gracious, humble guy. Like, I think he could have said a lot more and pushed back than he did. So I always respected that. But I do think, having seen this movie, it actually kind of makes sense more of The Last Jedi. Like
That's
in some
interesting.
ways, the same themes of like religion and sort of the corrupt nature of religion, and a journey to
Oh.
sort of find the heart, the values that he can still cling on. Like essentially what Luke Skywalker goes through in that movie is the journey of Knives Out 3. So it's, I don't know, and especially after hearing him in the interview talk about it, you can kind of, it makes more sense to me why he was exploring
Yeah.
those. I just don't necessarily want him to explore them in a Star Wars movie. But you are a big fan of this movie. So what is sort of
I was.
your initial, and I'll say I was a big fan too, but kind of what are your initial thoughts on it?
I saw it in theaters, and I think that made me.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah,
You
'cause
know, it's just-
you support cinema better
I
than...
support the art. So I think that made me like it maybe a little more than if I had seen it at home too. I'm already, to be completely honest, I'm already looking at like, oh, when's the Blu-ray coming out, because I want to own it. But I thought I liked the first one a lot, and me and my friends like made an off-brand Benoit Blanc too. Like that's how much we liked it. But the second one I was really disappointed in, and so I think my standard had really lowered for just the trilogy in general, and so I was blown away by the lighting, the the set that they chose, the location, wherever it was, the acting was amazing. I'm a huge Josh O'Connor fan now, and I think he just did amazing. And I think the biggest thing for me was it's the most faithful representation of a priest, of a relationship with Christ that I've ever seen in a Hollywood movie. And even though like we see, and I think we'll get into this later, but we see his humanity, and we see he even says, "I put my faith in you," to I think Blanc, and is
Yeah.
just completely disappointed. And so like the whole theme of the movie is like you can't do that. Like the only person that you can put your faith in is Jesus Christ. He's the only one that won't let you down. And then constantly he's in himself fighting that and coming back, like realizing what he's focusing on, and then coming back to keep his eyes on God again. And so I really, really loved it.
Yeah, like in some ways it does. I mean, there's some content stuff maybe that they're like, oh, yeah, this is a
Yeah.
secular, a so-called secular movie. But like there are definitely moments of this where it's like it comes across like a faith-based movie. Like they're,
Hmm.
talking about
But so much
how
better than
Christ served. Yeah, but there's
yeah.
an authenticity to it, where like it feels more earned, I guess. And I think it is surprising. Like I know even before this, I mean, you saw it before I did, so you shared some of that with me. But like I think people are just latching on to the fact that I think we've been burned as Christians so many times and that even goes back a bit to our podcast we did with Craig
Hmm.
and sort of his work of, a lot of the depictions of Christians in Hollywood is like, okay, he's going to be the corrupt one. Like he's going to be the
Yeah.
creep, or the very, bigoted and whatever. Like
Especially with like picturing Catholicism.
yeah, I guess we know what it's going to focus on if it's going to
Hmm.
be. And the funny thing is, like, this film actually does that too. Like, this film focuses very much on a corrupt minister and sort of a corrupt church that seems like they're driven by the wrong thing. Like,
Hmm.
but like it contrasts that with a very faithful depiction of a priest that's like he doesn't look down on his faith, and like he's sincerely trying to be a good priest, and like the
Hmm.
film actually like affirms that, and which is really interesting. And like I'll we can kind of key this up because uh I think the reason for that is that Ryan Johnson, although he's not a Christian now, like grew up Christian. Like he grew up
Yeah.
as a youth group kid. Like I think it seems like into his like 20s, and I think he's about 40. So about half of his
Yeah.
life, or 40 something, like half of his life, he was like a deeply committed evangelical
Hmm.
Christian. So like you can tell it very much is like he understands. And I mean, like the movie is focused on like Catholicism, and he wasn't Catholic, but
Yeah.
you can tell he understands some of the arguments and some of that. So I had the opportunity to interview him, and we'll link the full interview below, and check it out because it's great. He was a super humble, gracious
Hmm.
guy, like both off the camera and then I think on camera. But we thought we'd play one clip, and then we can kind of get into sort of the faith stuff of this movie. But this was a clip where I had asked him just, he had shared that he had spent much of his life growing up like in a Christian household. So I had asked him sort of like, what about that religious upbringing, like either positive or negative, like did he want to bring and like portray into the film?
Hmm.
Especially during those specific years, during kind of teenage into like young man years, the fact that my relationship with Christ was really the lens that I saw the entire world through, as the basis of my life. I mean, that forms a bedrock that even though I'm not a believer now, that's always there in some shape or form. There's a scene in the movie where Benoit Blanc, Daniel Craig's detective, when he first enters the story, he and Father Judd, who's Josh O'Connor's character, they have a conversation in a church about faith. And Blanc, who is very much a cynical, kind of very cynical about the church, and he's very much an atheist, he kind of gets uncomfortable in the church surrounding. He kind of unleashes a little tirade against the church, and he doesn't hold back. And then Father Judd, I think, really generously kind of like, but answers him in a way that truly answers him. And suddenly they're meeting as equals. And for me, that scene was important because it's not that I identify with one side or the other. For me, I have both of those people inside me, and so this movie is kind of an opportunity to have both of those sides that are both always present inside me and let them start talking.
So yeah, I think a super thoughtful answer by him,
Mhm.
and I thought the whole interview. Go check out the full thing. Just
It's really
very
great.
open about, just very open about his faith and his experiences, and even at the end of the interview, I kind of asked him what he thinks this makes this film a success, and he kind of points to that conversation part of, like presenting a film that actually makes people talk about issues, and he even says like in secular films, so-called secular films,
Mhm.
like religion is such a taboo topic that like most filmmakers that aren't like Christians themselves are reluctant to maybe step into, and,
Yeah.
and and he's like, you know what, like that, whether you're a believer or not, like religion is something that touches so many lives, and like people want to talk about it, like it's a personal thing, and
Mhm.
it's just there's sort of this fear of how do you navigate that, and it's so there's so much like tension to it, and like it's so heavy that I think a lot of people just don't just don't step
Yeah.
in, and he's like I want to do that, like I want to raise some of these these conversations. So I thought we'd get into that a little bit, because this film is, I don't know, I think this is really, I think all the Knives Out movies kind of are somewhat like they're like socially conscious, like
Mhm.
they're speaking to relevant sort of themes, and I think this film definitely touches on just a lot of, I think, important issues or topics as far as
Yeah.
just like the role of the church in society and just faith, and I think just the picture of having, because like Blanc, Daniel Craig's character, like the detective in these, is like clearly an atheist and like pretty cynical towards the church initially in this, and then O'Connor's character is like the faithful priest, and I think just their dynamic of, like
Yeah.
you have these like an atheist and a Christian, and like they're both like seeking the truth together, and they don't agree with each other, but they
Mhm.
actually kind of respect each other and like come to respect each other more, and
And
you sort
understand each other more
yeah, and
too.
you sort of see like Blanc, Craig's characters, like by the end of the film, like you see the shift. Like he's not a believer.
Mm-mm.
There's not a, this isn't like the Kendrick brothers or and he prays the
Yeah.
sinner's prayer. Like he's
But he
very,
understands like grace, which
yeah, he
is like the
understands.
first step, you know?
Yeah, he doesn't accept the theological
Mhm.
belief of God, but you do see that he, because initially he sort of sees the church almost as like an escapist, like,
Mhm.
yeah, like, it just sort of gives you hope, it gives you belonging, like you sort of, it's a
Mhm.
crutch you fall onto, this priest, and you sort of felt guilty, and this place makes you feel better,
Mhm.
and like by the end of the film, you sort of see him more like, no, like there is power in this grace and this way of like
Yeah.
the teachings of, and like the values and virtues of Christianity and Jesus, like
Mhm.
he does sort of latch on to those more, even if he doesn't clearly accept Jesus as being like the Son of God.
Yeah, because in the past, like I think this Knives Out. Another reason I like it so much, I think this is the like it's the deepest, the deepest one of the trilogy. Because he like in the past movies, this all has been a game to him. It's like a murder mystery game. That's how he views everything, and it's so fun for him. And you see that in this one too. And Father Judd, which is Josh O'Connor's character, gets caught up in the game too. But over and over again, like I was talking about, he remembers that these are people's lives, and his duty is to God and to loving them the way that Jesus would. And Craig in the end learns that maybe that's true.
Yeah.
Maybe he shouldn't just out everyone, but he should let them kind of come to their own
Well,
repentance in a way,
and I think there's a scene that both of us really liked,
Yeah.
where
It,
there was a like he's the O'Connor's character, the priest, Father Judd, is like he's sort of got he's caught up in trying to help solve this mystery,
mhm.
and he's following the suspects and Daniel Craig's character, and at one point like, he's calling like he's calling someone to
Yeah, it's so
to
good.
try and get more information and like clues and stuff, and he's just trying to get the information so they can move on and try and find the
Mhm.
murderer, and like this lady on the other side of the phone, it kind of asks if she can talk to him, and like she needs to share something with him,
Mhm.
and you sort of see him like Father Judd be like, no, like like I
Yeah.
need to get going, like there's important stuff to do, like, I gotta go solve this and caught up in this, and you know and you sort of see the realization of like, well, like I'm called to be a shepherd, like I'm called to be a pastor and minister, and this lady is expressing
Yeah.
sincere hurt, and you sort of see that switch for him of like where he does actually go take the call, even though Daniel Craig's character, Blanc,
Well,
is ready to to go.
Yeah, and it's so good because it's like it's them bantering back and forth. It is a buddy cop movie in a way. It's Craig and O'Connor bantering back and forth, so it's really, really funny because they're just like, "Oh my gosh, like we're about to figure it out," and then she's like, "Can you pray for me?" And it just hits so hard, everything just stops, and he, like what you said, he has that realization, and there's just this long moment of silence that you see him like reflecting on everything. It's just an incredible performance and writing there.
Yeah, and I think especially in that moment to me, because that's where his character sort of changes a bit of he sort of backs off a bit of the investigation and be like, you know what,
Yeah.
like, I'm called to serve people. I'm not just called to, not that they don't want to help find the murderer or anything. Because I do think like, one of the things, and I kind of asked in the interview, I asked Ryan a little bit about it, is like you sort of see like kind of a through line of the film is you sort of see like the church, kind of the role of the church in society, like sort of on the negative side with the initial sort of head priest at the church, uh, very much like a culture war Christianity. Like it's very fire and brimstone. Like we got to push back. Like we got to fight with the sword. We got we can't be weak. We got to push and change and condemn and you sort of see a lot of the people in the church like latch on to that, kind of fighting this culture war, and you sort of see the contrast with Father Judd of, well, like, am I called to be a warrior or am I called to be like a shepherd? Like, am I called to just go, find the guilty people and judge them, or am I called to, stop on the phone and pray for someone and walk them through their hardships? And you sort of see that tension like within the character himself of he's pulled between those two things. And I think that's what works so well with this film is that it kind of critiques the church. And I think in ways that I actually agree with, even as a Christian, like some of that posture of this,
definitely,
like and it's very like heightened, obviously in the film, but like that culture war, like, the church is, we're being persecuted and we need to sort of fight back. And then it sort of critiques the church while also showing like, this is the good though. Like, it's not just the church is bad. It's here's what it looks like when the church isn't bad, when the church is loving that Christ. And you so you can sort of have both those at the same time.
And that comes to a head too, and when Blanc is introduced in this movie, he comes in, and it's the first time that him and Judd are introduced, and Judd is like, he's having a moment because like someone just got murdered, but when Blanc comes in, like all of his critiques about the church pretty much are about what you just talked about, are about the warrior, like cultural war conversation. And so he like goes in and he just lists off all of these reasons why he doesn't agree with the church and even doesn't believe in God. And Judd's response, he doesn't really address each and every individual point that he made, but he addresses the heart of the issue and just kind of like is like asking, oh, but like what's going on in your life, like what's going on in your own heart. And that's what answers Blanc's like his argument. And it's so powerful also in the way that like he's been having this moment and he's caught up in this murder and all of these things, but as soon as someone comes to him who really needs God and who needs Jesus, he just flips back and is like, I know the truth. And he never says any of this. You see this in like his posture and everything. He's like, I know the truth and this person needs the truth. And so he flips back into his duty that God has given to him. And so it's just really cool. It's really cool to me the way that they did that.
And it's interesting too, because like it seems like there's like, I mean, at this point it's almost like a trend. Like because like we both saw Last Breath, right? That's the name of the Justin Lin movie.
Last
Days. Where about yeah, not the end of the movie.
I'm going to talk about Last Breath later, just so you know.
But like, which was another movie about like a Christian made by a major Hollywood director who was not himself a Christian. And I don't know if ever was. I don't think Justin Lin grew up Christian. I think he just was intrigued by it and wanted to have that conversation. And I think maybe me and you, I think we felt similar about that movie too, but I don't think we liked it as much as we like Knives Out. But then you have like Ryan Johnson, who like obviously like, he grew up in the church, but he's not a Christian now, and he's sort of having those conversations. And I don't know, like obviously there are ways where that can go off the rails, maybe of and we talked about that with the Last Days movie. Like there is a queasy part of like, hey, people outside of the church sort of depicting who we are. You know, are we okay with that? But I think this movie again shows too that there are places I think that the stories like currently confessing Christians,
Mm-hmm.
like there are places in these sort of stories that like a non-Christian's willing to go that I
Mm-hmm.
don't know that as Christians are as comfortable with, but I think they're very valuable to go. Like I think the
Yeah, do
way
you
that
think that
this,
we need to? I think that we need to.
yeah, like I think I think a Christian filmmaker would be a bit more reluctant to leave this movie's sort of internal debate or conversation,
Mm-hmm.
like to leave it open ended like it was, or to give like valid critiques and arguments into the voice of an atheist character,
Mm-hmm.
and not just sort of straw man, easily debunked that the Christian really wins. Like to just have them both share, I think, honest, like legitimate concerns or viewpoints and kind of go
Mm-hmm.
back and forth and never really land and never have either one of them change their mind. Like I don't know. I think there are Christian filmmakers that will do that. Like I don't want to just blanket statement, but it just seems like we are more uncomfortable. We sort of want the clean ending, and I don't know. I think that's why I think a movie like Knives Out is interesting to me
Mm-hmm.
because it's not really pushing either. Like it's not pushing against the church, or it's not like trying to encourage people not to believe.
Mm-hmm.
It's also not necessarily just trying to preach salvation, obviously, because Ryan Johnson's not a Christian. But it's having those conversations in a way that just feels way more authentic, and I don't know.
Yeah.
I like that about that. Like I enjoy that a lot more than I do
Oh, me
just
too.
like let's go to church and be told and make sure you really get it. This is what's happening. And
Yeah, well, my question is like, how can we create films like that really show, um, like Jesus's teachings and how important this is and these struggles that people have without having it be about a priest, you know? Like I know it's possible, it's just a lot harder to make that come across. But I think that's gonna become the most important genre, if you can call it a genre, in um in using film as a way of evangelism, you know? But yeah, that's a question for another day, I think.
yeah, and I do think, and maybe we can kind of end with this, but I do think there, like Johnson was saying, and at the end of my interview with him, like it's sort of somewhat taboo, faith and religion, but like it's so personal to people. It does seem like there is an increased willingness for people to, obviously like Johnson doing it and Justin Lin with Last Days, but
Mhm.
even like movies like Avatar are very much like, not Christian, but like very spiritual, about faith, about belief, like the themes and that. Like, it seems like there are a lot of movies lately where whether they get to like as overtly the Christian church, that issue, they don't always go that far, but like
Mhm.
it seems like it is more common for films these days to actually explore faith and belief in some of those themes. And
Yeah.
like, because I think like Johnson's right, like whether you believe or not, like religion and faith and things are like a very prevalent reality in our world that has touched the experience of many people. And it's
Mhm.
crazy that it's not always more explored, like that there are other, like,
Yeah.
like romance or all these other things, that human experiences that we all have. And it's like, well, of course you explore those in film,
Yeah.
but like faith and belief and, understanding, all that kind of stuff. I don't know. I feel like whether you're a Christian or not, like those should be themes that are explored. So I don't know.
Definitely.
I liked what this movie had going on. I do
Well,
think it's an interesting one for. Oh, what were you gonna say?
I don't want you to gloss over these quotes that you have in the show notes because they're really good, but you can read them if you want to.
Yeah, maybe I'll end with end with some of these because these are, and this is sort of was my major takeaway with this. This is from Father Judd
Mhm.
when he is pushing back against sort of that like uh, culture of war, the warrior posture as opposed to sort of the shepherd. And like for those that haven't seen the movie, obviously Wicks is the name of like the main priest that is like the fire and brimstone, like
Mhm.
take on the culture. So this is Father Judd talking to Blanc, said, who's trying to pull him back into the investigation.
Mhm.
Says, "You're setting me up against my real and only purpose in life, which is not to fight the wicked and bring them to justice, but to serve them and bring them to Christ. Otherwise, I'm just as bad as Wicks, making it about me and not Jesus."
Just
That was
snaps. Just
that level
snaps.
preach.
So good.
And then he continues, says, in that same conversation, I think, says, "We are here to serve the world, not beat it. That's what Christ did. So when Wicks was talking about fighting the world for Christ's sake, he wasn't talking about Christ. He was talking about his own ego and power. He was never talking about Christ. I mean, like, you could rip that right out of like a Wonder Project movie, like, you know, like that's.
But it's
such,
different. It's different. I think.
yeah, like, it's such a. I don't know. It's surprising to have that clear of like um, an affirmation of like Jesus, and again, people know me from the podcast. Like, I am very much not a culture war guy. Like, I think not that Christians don't push back against the evil and culture and all
Mhm.
that, but like as a posture of the church,
Me too. Yeah.
I think as this film sort of summarizes, like, I think our legacy and impact and like witness is grace and service and, you know, loving the people as like a mission field, not like a battlefield type
Mhm.
thing. And I think this film, and maybe that's why I resonate with this movie so much, is like I believe, like, you know, Ryan, unlike Ryan Johnson, like, I believe in the truth of Christ beyond just his teachings of, you know, and good acts and all that kind of stuff. But I don't know. This film to me is, I think I'm curious to see how it will be received by, like, I think Christians are receiving it well, and like religious people. I'm
Mhm.
curious if like sort of these secular audiences will latch onto it as much as we have, but time will tell, and maybe we can follow up on that next week when this film hits Netflix on this
Yes.
Friday.
So
But
good.
speaking of things that I'm sure are going to be good, I'm sure will be deeply personal and insightful, is the final segment of this podcast. We have things we like that you should like too. Well, Nyah, this is your turn to enlighten me and many others about something that you like. So, what is one thing right now that you like that we should like too?
Well, one of my favorite days of the year. I won't say that it's my favorite because I know that I'll get some backlash from you. But I love Spotify Wrapped Day. It's amazing. I just love music in general, especially, yeah. That could be a whole other conversation. So Spotify Wrapped, which I know you don't listen to Spotify, which I just found out this morning. But for those who care and who want to know, my top artist was Joe, or DJO, who is Joe Keery. It's Steve from Stranger Things. And Dusty and I got to see his concert in like the first day of October this year, and I go to a lot of shows, and this was my favorite show that I've been to because you could tell everyone on the stage was so incredibly talented and just loved playing music and performing, and so that just made it so much better that they were just really focused in on creating these beautiful sounds. And then I said that I'd talk about Last Breath later, so this is that time. The song One Last Breath by Creed was my fourth highest song of 2025.
That is, because I mean, Creed, I feel like is before your time.
Oh,
Creed.
yeah. I mean, I love
I mean, I
all
feel
their
like Creed
music.
is everyone's time, if we're being honest.
It's a universal experience for sure. But that was like one of my hype up songs for this year, and so I thought that was really. And Forrest Frank was my fourth highest artist, which was a little surprising to me, but love the guy. He's
So
my
I'm
close
curious.
friend.
I should ask you, and especially now that we've been doing this podcast together for a while, and you've heard all of my recommendations. How many European power metal bands cracked the top 10
Oh,
this year?
zero.
Oh.
Zero have even cracked my listening from this year, I must say. So
Well, I feel like
I'm
this
sorry
is because
about
you got
that.
started late in the year. The question will be next year.
Next
How
year,
many like
all
German
five.
thrash metal bands?
all
will-
five of my top artists. It'll just be
yeah.
different countries that differentiates it. Sweden, Germany,
Well,
France.
Sweden's a good place to start. I would
Okay.
start with Sweden for more melodic stuff. But
Okay.
I have all of next year to continue to feed your musical
Amazing.
your taste, and I expect at least one of those bands to crack the top 10.
Well,
Uh,
if anyone wants recommendations, I'll put my Spotify Wrapped right here, so everyone
See, I feel
can
like
see.
I feel like I don't need a Spotify rap because I feel like mine would be like, oh, there's
This-
metal music. Like,
Wow.
Whoa, who
No.
knew? I mean, I guess which metal music? Maybe I'll try and listen to a bit more Spotify so I too can have a Spotify
right.
Wrap. But speaking of wrap, this is a wrap on this episode, and almost for the year. So next week, I believe, unless I'm getting my dates all confused, will be
you're
our final episode before Christmas, and then we'll take a couple weeks, perhaps several weeks off over the holidays and stuff to recharge and let Nyah listen to more power metal music and get amped up. So next week we
That's
will
what I'll be doing.
we will have our final podcast of the year. Probably do a Christmas themed episode. So if you were Nyah gonna planning, that would be the good moment to give me the gift.
Oh, okay.
Maybe
Over
do
the
unwrapping.
screen.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you want to somehow get that to me before,
Okay.
I'm just giving you a week heads up. But we hope that you will all join us there, having a very Merry Christmas, and that you will continue and making the Faith and Pop Culture podcast a part of your annual Christmas traditions. So until then, we'll see you next week for more conversations on faith and pop culture.
Bye.